Our top story: Democratic Congresswoman Summer Lee beat back a primary challenge in Tuesday's Pennsylvania primary and now goes on to run for re-election as the Democratic candidate in the November election. Lee, a first-term member of Congress, and she is part of the squad, has been critical of Israel's war in Gaza. Even before October 7th, back in 2022, when she first ran for Congress, Lee had to do battle with AIPAC-funded super PACs attacking her leftist policies. You know, those super PACs, though, it was dark money. They never mentioned her policies on Israel, and they didn't identify as belonging to AIPAC. What you had was AIPAC through another super PAC funded by AIPAC. They were running anti-Summer Lee ads, never mentioning that they were paid for by the far-right conservative AIPAC, which speaks solely for Benjamin Netanyahu's hard-right party of ethno-nationalists in Israel. AIPAC backed off this time, but she still faced stiff competition from Democratic challenger Bhavini Patel, who lost last night by a landslide. Our top story: Summer Lee, Congresswoman Summer Lee, wins the Pennsylvania primary by a 21% landslide. I will have more on that later on in the show. Sad news this morning. Former Congressman George Santos, who brought joy to millions, announced yesterday he is dropping out of his race for New York's 1st congressional district because, sadly, he was unable to raise money. Odd, isn't it? Did Santos do something that might make people disinclined to donate? Did he violate some sacred trust? I mean, sure, he stole credit card numbers from contributors and used them for his Botox injections and shopping sprees at Sephora, but is that really fraud? I mean, technically, if you're going to get all holier than thou and nitpicky about it, then yeah, you could say it's fraud. The same way if I don't know, pulled out a gun and shot you in the face. Technically, if you're going to follow the letter of the law and be a stickler about these things, then yeah, that could be construed as murder. So poor George Santos couldn't raise any money. Turns out Republicans don't like their donations going towards OnlyFans and Hermes scarves. No, Republicans are very specific when they donate. They only want their money spent on legal fees after you've been indicted for hiding hush money payments to a porn star. Donald Trump's trial in a Manhattan criminal courtroom continued yesterday. New York prosecutor Joshua Steinglass yesterday said Donald Trump was guilty of an additional crime besides the 34 counts he has already been charged with. Steinglass said Trump broke another New York state law that forbids candidates for office from conspiring to prevent an election. Yeah. And what about that other New York state law, Penal Code 442, that says don't be a D-bag? I'm pretty certain Trump is also guilty of that. Prosecutor Matthew Colangelo accused Trump of hatching the scheme by which the National Enquirer would begin looking for stories that were unflattering to Donald Trump and then catching and killing them. Pay for the exclusive rights to the story, attach a penalty for violating the exclusivity, and then killing the story so it never sees the light of day. Colangelo said the idea came to fruition after Donald Trump convened a meeting in Trump Tower in June of 2015, right after Trump announced he was a candidate for president. Attending that meeting were Trump's personal lawyer and fixer Michael Cohen and David Pecker, who at the time was publisher of the National Enquirer. Now, we knew Cohen had turned state's evidence after he was sentenced to 3 years in prison for one of the very crimes Trump is now standing trial for. But we only learned this week that Pecker would be testifying against the prick. In their opening statement, prosecutors say the catch and kill was deployed 3 times in the lead up to the 2016 election. First, when porn star Stormy Daniels got paid $130,000 to remain silent about having unprotected sex with Donald only weeks after Melania gave birth to their son. Michael Cohen will soon testify he took a loan out against one of his own properties, then deposited $130,000 from that loan into his checking account to pay off Stormy Daniels. He then was told to begin billing the Trump Organization each month for legal services he never provided in order to be reimbursed for these hush money payments to Stormy Daniels. The payments continued each month, with Cohen eventually showing up inside the Oval Office to be hand-delivered checks from then-President Donald Trump. Prosecutors say whatever Michael Cohen paid to silence someone, Trump would reimburse Cohen double what Cohen put out, which, prosecutors say, establishes Trump's state of mind. He knew he was committing a crime because he paid Cohen back double. Trump was buying Cohen's silence as well. It was hush money to Stormy Daniels, and because he doubled it, it was also hush money to Michael Cohen. The second catch and kill was implemented to silence Playboy playmate Karen McDougal, who carried on a year-long affair with Donald Trump while Melania was pregnant with their son. When the National Enquirer alerted Michael Cohen that McDougal was ready to go public, Cohen instructed Pecker to buy exclusive rights to the story from Karen McDougal for $150,000. She wanted $150,000 not to tell anybody she slept with Donald Trump. You know, if I slept with Donald Trump for a year, I'd be the one paying Donald Trump $150,000 not to talk about it. Who wants anyone knowing that some orange spray-tanned turd was inside of me? Prosecutors also charged that Trump arranged for the National Enquirer to cut a check for $30,000 to Dino Sajudin, a doorman at Trump Tower who claimed Trump fathered a child out of wedlock with one of the cleaning ladies at Trump Tower. The Enquirer caught the story and killed it for $30,000, although it turned out Trump didn't father a child out of wedlock with a cleaning lady at Trump Tower. That would be impossible because anybody who's visited Trump Tower or stayed at any Trump properties knows he doesn't spring for cleaning ladies or exterminators. I read the public health inspector's report on Trump's Doral Hotel in Miami. Trump should catch and kill the cockroaches down there. Pecker also testified yesterday that Ted Cruz's father, Rafael Cruz, didn't kill JFK. You might remember in the 2016 election, the National Enquirer conspired with the Trump campaign to publish bad stories about his opponents, like Ted Cruz. One of those stories was directed at Ted Cruz, who at the time was the last Republican standing in 2016, before he finally had to drop out and then refused to endorse Trump at the Cleveland convention. Remember that speech where they booed him? Anyway, the Enquirer began publishing stories in 2016 claiming that Rafael Cruz, Ted's father, because he was Cuban, was in on the Kennedy assassination. Imagine that, Trump claiming Cruz's dad killed Kennedy just because he's Cuban. Would Trump do that? Yes. Thursday was not a good day for Trump. This is just one of 4 criminal trials he faces this year. Down in Miami, where the roach-infested Miami Doral is located, I read the health report. Trump is also on trial for violating the Espionage Act for mishandling classified documents. One of the people you see at Trump's side all the time is his body man, Walt Nauta, who worked as Trump's valet at the White House. Nauta worked briefly when Joe Biden moved in, but was ordered off the grounds after he was accused of sexually harassing several female co-workers. When Trump heard that Nauta was dismissed because of sexual harassment allegations, he called Nauta and said, "Come on down to Mar-a-Lago. You'll fit right in here." So Nauta became an employee of Mar-a-Lago, and it was kind of Trump's body man, and that's why he got indicted by special counsel Jack Smith for obstruction of justice. Walt Nauta is accused of hiding boxes of classified documents from the FBI during the court-ordered search of Mar-a-Lago. Like I said, the day started off really bad, with CNN reporting that the FBI now has testimony that Donald Trump promised Walt Nauta that after he's reelected, Trump would pardon Nauta. If the Miami trial ever gets underway, Jack Smith, the special counsel, could use this new information to hand down another set of superseding indictments charging Trump with witness tampering and more counts of obstruction of justice. And we also found out that the FBI didn't get it all, that there was a hidden room at Mar-a-Lago, and when they were conducting the search, we've just found out that Trump hid more classified documents from the FBI. Meanwhile, Donald Trump clearly violated the gag order imposed on him by Judge Juan Merchan, who's presiding over the Manhattan criminal trial. Trump, because of the gag order, is forbidden from talking about any of the witnesses set to testify against him. Here is Donald Trump yesterday violating the gag order, once again, calling his old fixer, Michael Cohen, a liar. This is witness intimidation.
And when are they going to look at all the lies that Cohen did in the last trial? He got caught lying in the last trial. So he got caught lying, pure lie. And when are they going to look at that?
You're not allowed to do that. Anybody else would be locked up for that. Trump has also violated the gag order by going after the jurors, accusing them all of being Democrats and worse. Because of so many death threats leveled against judges, prosecutors, and jurors in previous Trump trials, the names of these jurors in this trial are being kept secret. Yesterday, the jurors were asked to leave the courtroom so Judge Merchan could confer with prosecutors and Trump's attorneys to determine whether Trump had indeed violated the gag order. During yesterday's gag order hearing, prosecutors accused Trump of violating the gag order 10 times, attacking 2 witnesses and the jury. The witness intimidation they cited was Trump calling Stormy Daniels a sleazebag and repeatedly calling Michael Cohen a liar. Prosecutors charged Trump with intimidating members of the jury, citing one of the jurors who asked to be removed, and he was removed the morning after Trump took to social media and reposted a clip from Jesse Watters of Fox News, where Watters accuses the jurors of lying during the voir dire to get picked because they are, quote, undercover liberal activists sent in the courtroom to destroy Donald Trump. This is what Donald Trump posted. Watters, according to the New York Times, then shared personal information about the jurors in order to make them easier to identify. Well, the next day, one of the jurors told the judge they wanted to be removed, and the judge granted that frightened juror's request. During yesterday's hearing, prosecutors argued this is precisely why the gag order was put into place. It was some gag order hearing yesterday, embarrassing for Trump's attorneys. According to reporting in Rolling Stone, Judge Merchan became enraged by Trump's defense attorneys when they tried to argue that Trump had not violated the gag order, but couldn't make the argument and were embarrassing themselves. At one point, the judge angrily told Trump's lawyers they were presenting no evidence or any argument to prove Donald Trump violated his gag order. Merchan reportedly said, quote, "You've presented nothing. You're losing all credibility with this court." The New York Times is reporting that during the gag order hearing yesterday, the judge was almost begging Trump's attorneys to make a respectable argument for their client, but they were incapable of it, and the judge reportedly looked at them dismissively and with contempt. Alina Habba, his previous attorney, famously said, "I'd rather be pretty than smart." These new attorneys Trump's got, stupid and ugly. Really, stupid and ugly. Prosecutors want Trump to be fined $1,000 for each of the 10 gag order violations, and they have also asked the judge to consider jailing Trump if he persists in violating that gag order. The judge said he would have a ruling on his gag order violation soon, and he then ordered the jurors back into the courtroom so the trial could resume. One of the problems Donald Trump's attorneys face is Donald Trump is their client, and they can't control him. Nobody can. And as we saw in their trying to advocate on his behalf during the gag order hearing yesterday, there is simply no way to justify Donald Trump's behavior. It's hard to be a defense attorney for someone whose behavior is indefensible. Trump was asked on Friday if he was planning to testify, and Trump said yes. Yes. Trump repeatedly claims only cowards plead the fifth, even though he's pled the fifth hundreds of times in other trials. This is the guy, Donald Trump, who will not stop violating gag orders until you put him under oath and ask him to testify. Then he shuts up. So here's the problem Donald Trump and his attorneys have. We're in the middle of a presidential campaign, and while Joe Biden is out on the stump, Trump is stuck brooding in that dingy courtroom, and he's trying to use the court as free campaign advertising because he can't afford real advertising. The lawyers are getting all the money. He loves to hold court outside the court. But now he's painted himself in a corner. He said he's going to testify. If he doesn't testify, Biden supporters will say, "What are you afraid of? I mean, if you're innocent, take the stand. I mean, if you're not a liar, Donald Trump, defend yourself under oath." Right now, Donald Trump knows the world is watching and he's starving for attention. A part of Donald Trump thinks, I can handle this. I can testify, because Donald Trump has logged more hours in a courtroom than that judge, prosecutor, and his entire defense team combined. That's true. Something like 4,000 civil lawsuits. He thinks he can handle it. Donald Trump has the arrogance and stupidity of Prince Andrew doing that interview with the BBC. Trump's brash enough to think, I got this. That's how delusional Donald Trump is. Put me on the stand. I got this. But Donald Trump's attorneys know the second you get Donald Trump under oath, he perjures himself. He can't help but lie. And this is not one of those thousands of civil lawsuits Trump's been a party to. This is a criminal trial. To make matters worse for Donald Trump, the judge in this case last week drew some parameters that were both favorable and unfavorable for Donald Trump should he decide to testify. For example, the judge ruled that the jury is not allowed to know that Donald Trump slept with Stormy Daniels only weeks after Melania gave birth to their son. Trump's attorneys argued the jury should know that he cheated, committed adultery, but they shouldn't be allowed to know that he cheated right after Melania gave birth. They said, this is what Trump's attorneys said, and it's public record. They said if a jury ever discovered that our client, Donald Trump, slept with a porn star only weeks after his wife gave him a son, there is simply no way we could ever get an innocent verdict. And Judge Mershon said, yeah, you're right. That's pretty unfair. Okay, so the jury can't be told about that. And if Trump takes the stand, they can't ask him, had your wife just given birth right after you had, when you had sex with the porn star, had your wife just given birth? They can't ask that question. But what Judge Mershon has allowed to be entered into evidence, what Judge Juan Mershon says, if Donald Trump does testify, he can be asked before the jury about the E. Jean Carroll lawsuit, where another jury in a civil trial last year ruled that Donald Trump raped E. Jean Carroll, raped her in what is called common law parlance. The judge, Judge Kaplan, twice put into writing that the jury in common law practice ruled that Donald Trump raped E. Jean Carroll. Judge Juan Mershon also ruled that the jury would also be allowed to learn about the $500 million judgment against Donald Trump handed down early this year for defrauding lenders. And of course, by the jury learning about these things, the judge ruled that should Donald Trump take the stand, prosecutors can ask him all about those trials. So, will Donald Trump be stupid enough to testify? What I've been told is his lawyers will quit before they let him get examined under oath by the judge and prosecutors. In New York State, defendants in criminal trials such as these rarely testify. And New York State law mandates that the judge order the jury not to take into consideration that the defendant didn't testify to his own innocence. In other words, in New York State, a jury is not allowed to think less of a defendant because he chose not to take the stand. Trump isn't going to take the stand. He's going to claim he's taking the stand. He's going to promise he's taking the stand. Right now, he thinks he wants to take the stand. He's not taking the stand. However, that doesn't mean Donald Trump won't be speaking in court. Well, not so much speaking as shouting, grunting, and of course, farting. Trump was blurting things out during the E. Jean Carroll trial through his mouth and elsewhere. And he is in hell right now, forced to sit 6 to 8 hours a day in front of an audience and not being able to say anything. It is taking a major toll on Donald Trump. He is disheveled. He's slumped over. He's walking and talking like a loser, and he's slurring his speech. His grammar is off. And he feels abandoned by his worthless MAGA morons. Before this trial began, Trump repeatedly took to social media, urging his supporters to peacefully assemble outside the Manhattan courtroom and protest this miscarriage of justice. But nobody is protesting, and I do mean nobody. And Trump is reportedly hurt. He's taking this personally, that nobody is showing up to the courtroom each morning or outside the courtroom on the steps. He sees no MAGA morons. He feels isolated. The New York Times reports, Trump has made no secret of the fact that he wanted a circus outside the courtroom. He said, I want a circus outside the courtroom. But the circus never came to town. When he shows up, it only smells like a circus, specifically elephant farts. But his supporters are not heeding the call. He keeps putting out feelers, urging his people to bring in protesters. Nobody's showing up. And I'm being serious. His feelings are hurt. He is suffering. And he's humiliated. How many times before this trial began did he say, I won't be able to control my people if you indict me? How many times have Republicans warned, don't put him on trial, his people will not put up with it? They're putting up with it. You know, you might remember he sat and watched January 6th on the TV while having lunch, and he didn't want to be interrupted. He loved it. And he expected his MAGA morons to march on the courtroom to save him. But they've never materialized. So now he's taking to social media and insisting the reason there are no protesters is because they're not allowed anywhere near the courthouse. This is a lie. The New York Times says Trump is lying. The reason there are no protesters is because nobody is showing up. Kind of like his inauguration. And I mean nobody is showing up. Just a handful of lunatics like Laura Loomer one day. And yesterday, Andrew Giuliani showed up again. Andrew Giuliani. There he is. Andrew Giuliani, the son of Rudy Giuliani, showing all the loyalty to Trump that Trump refuses to show his father. Donald Trump owes Andrew Giuliani's dad $2 million for losing 61 lawsuits challenging the 2020 election results in the lead up to January 6th. Rudy is bankrupt. He owes his attorneys millions of dollars. Donald Trump owes him $2 million. And Donald Trump raised hundreds of millions of dollars right after losing the presidential election in 2020. His Save America PAC raised hundreds of millions of dollars from small donors with even smaller minds who were promised that the money they give would go towards investigating voter fraud. In other words, the donors were told that money would be going to Rudy Giuliani to investigate or make up voter fraud. That money should at least be paying Rudy the $2 million he's owed to lose all those court cases, or at least some of it should go towards his legal fees. Not a penny. Zero. Just like Andrew Giuliani. Zero. Rudy's police commissioner, Bernard Kerik. Rudy Giuliani had the most racist police force when he was America's mayor, thanks to this clown, Bernard Kerik. They invented or perfected stop and frisk. They made it against the law for black people to leave their home. So Rudy's police commissioner, Bernard Kerik, was hired by Rudy right after the election to look into voter fraud in the lead up to January. Okay, they didn't look to make it up, to manufacture, to plant evidence of voter. Who better to plant evidence of voter fraud than the racist commissioner, police commissioner of New York, Bernard Kerik? So Kerik, after serving as police commissioner of New York, then served several years in prison for tax fraud. I think he might have also been pardoned by Trump. I'm not sure, for other things. Also, after 9/11, this patriot carried on extramarital affairs inside a special apartment near Ground Zero. that was reserved for first responders to nap and shower. This is what a great man Bernard Kerik is. Right after 9/11, people donated this great apartment for the first responders, men and women working 48 hours straight, rummaging through the wreckage. They were exhausted. They needed to shower and sleep, but they couldn't use the apartment because Police Commissioner Bernard Kerik was too cheap to spring for a motel when he wanted to cheat on his wife. Anyway, he finally got out of prison, began working for Rudy to invent voter fraud, and after January 6, he was infuriated. Not because the Capitol got destroyed, he was infuriated because he didn't get paid. Trump didn't pay him. There are reports that Bernard Kerik is the one who, when he testified before special counsel Jack Smith's grand jury, when he testified, he urged Jack Smith to look into the hundreds upon hundreds of millions of dollars that were donated right after the election to Donald Trump's Save America PAC. Bernard Kerik reportedly asked during his testimony before the grand jury, "Where did all that money go? Didn't go to me." Trump's legal fees, he said, can't be in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, I have been told that when Donald Trump loses in November, the next tranche of indictments coming from special counsel Jack Smith will be all about Donald Trump's Save America PAC. Where did that money go? Because this is wire fraud. When you take to social media, like Donald Trump did, when you go on the internet and lie to your MAGA morons and raise hundreds of millions of dollars from small-minded, small donors, promising them this money they give will be spent to save our democracy, to save America. When you say it's going to pay for an army of attorneys and investigators uncovering fraud, and when not a single penny is spent investigating voter fraud, then that's wire fraud. Wire fraud. But there he is, Andrew Giuliani, Rudy's son, once again showing up outside the courtroom, screaming for relevance, screaming for attention about how the Biden Justice Department is persecuting Donald Trump. Andrew Giuliani, like father, like simp. And then yesterday, after the gag order hearing, David Pecker, the former publisher of the National Enquirer, took the stand once again. He testified on Monday, and then he testified again yesterday. That would be David Pecker. David Pecker. I wonder if David Pecker is in any way related to John Stankey, the CEO of AT&T. Remember John Stankey? For one brief moment, John Stankey, the head of AT&T, was a Hollywood power player. Do you remember this? AT&T briefly owned Time Warner, HBO, TBS, Warner Brothers movie studio, and Mr. Stankey was a modern-day Louis B. Mayer for like half a second. And then he and everybody else realized, what do I know about movies and television? All I've ever produced was a dial tone and half a busy signal. I run AT&T. I don't know anything about entertainment. So Mr. Stankey, seen here for his big Hollywood glamour shot, was his glamour shot that he took for Variety. For that nanosecond, he was a Hollywood power player. He quickly got out of the entertainment business. AT&T sold everything to the Discovery Channel. Turns out, Mr. Stankey learned that providing crappy internet service doesn't make you qualified to provide crappy entertainment as well. Mr. Stanky. That would be Mr. Stanky. And I wonder if Mr. Stanky is related to David Pecker, the former publisher of the National Enquirer. Or perhaps Mr. Stanky is related to Mr. Hanke. That would be Don Hanke, the loan shark who put up the $175 million bond for Donald Trump in his civil fraud trial. That's Mr. Hanke, who made billions ripping off American soldiers on subprime car loans. He was fined several $1 million for ripping off our soldiers. But you know he supports our troops because they support him. Mr. Hanke's $175 million bond for Trump came under scrutiny earlier in the week. New York State Attorney General Letitia James discovered that Mr. Hanke owns several companies, and the company that put up the $175 million for Trump, right before putting that money up, the company notified regulators, as they're forced to, and policyholders that the company has less than the $175 million that they gave to Donald Trump in the company bank account. So Letitia James and Judge Arthur Engoron became worried that Mr. Hanke's company, Knight Specialty Insurance, couldn't produce the $175 million after Trump loses on appeal. Well, earlier this week, Mr. Hanke, along with Trump's attorneys, guaranteed the court that the $175 million would be kept in a cash account with full transparency for the court to keep an eye on. So that was good news for Trump. Mr. Hanke from Knight Specialty Insurance came through. Mr. Hanke came through. That would be billionaire and subprime loan king Don Hanke. Mr. Hanke, no relation to Mr. Stanky, John Stanky of AT&T, or David Pecker, the former publisher of the National Enquirer. This portion of the David Feldman Show is brought to you by the law office of Hanke, Stanky, and Pecker. Have you or someone you know been injured by a great-grandparent who refused to change the name given to them at Ellis Island? Call the law offices of Hanke, Stanky, and Pecker. We know what it's like to get bullied throughout your entire childhood and into your adult years just because your great-grandparents had no idea that the Irish immigrant inspectors at Ellis Island were messing with them. Call the law offices of Hanke, Stanky, and Pecker at 1-800-ADULT Disposable Wet Wipes. That would be the law offices of Hanke, Stanky, and Pecker. Operators are standing by right now at 1-800-ADULT Disposable Wet Wipes. Once again, 1-800-ADULT Disposable Wet Wipes. International charges may apply. Marjorie Taylor Greene appeared on Alex Jones's program yesterday because why? Why? Because Christiane Amanpour was all booked up. Christiane Amanpour really wanted to have Marjorie Taylor Greene on her show. I mean, come on, where else is Marjorie Taylor Greene, this QAnon spouting, gun-toting gym rat? Where else is she going to appear? She goes on the Alex Jones show. She told Alex Jones that Democrats are putting Donald Trump on trial because they want him to be murdered in prison. Marjorie, nobody wants Donald Trump murdered in prison. We want him to die in prison, but we don't want him murdered in prison. We all want Trump to live a long, long life, 30 to 50 years in prison. We wish him nothing but the best of health in prison. Marjorie Taylor Greene is still promising to punish Speaker Mike Johnson by going through with her motion to vacate the chair after Speaker Johnson was able to push through a $61 billion supplemental for Ukraine on Saturday. and that entire foreign aid supplemental passed late last night in the Senate by a vote of 79 to 18. It now heads over to Joe Biden's desk for his signature. With the $61 billion Ukraine supplemental finally passed and moving to the White House desk for his signature, President Biden put in a call to Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, telling him that the much-needed military aid will soon be on its way. But first, I need you to do me a favor. Biden told Zelensky he will not free up the arms shipment authorized by Congress unless Zelensky agreed to dig up dirt on Hunter Biden. President Biden then gave Zelensky the number of his point man on this investigation, Rudy Giuliani, and then thanked the Ukrainian president for what Biden called a perfect call. Or maybe it's the mushrooms I took before the show started. Well, aid to Ukraine passed in the Senate 2 months ago with bipartisan support. Almost 70% of the upper chamber voted yes. And then last night, it passed again, thanks in no small measure to Minority Leader Republican Mitch McConnell. As the Ukraine supplemental worked its way through the Senate yesterday with procedural votes and then a final vote, Mitch McConnell told reporters that the supplemental got stalled in the House for 6 months, specifically because of Tucker Carlson. McConnell said Carlson, before getting canned last year, used his platform on Fox News to trash Ukraine by spreading lies about the Zelensky government. McConnell said all the talk about Zelensky being a Nazi, it all began with Carlson. Well, it all began with Putin, and then Carlson parroted Putin's talking points. McConnell added too many Republicans in the House of Representatives believed those lies and began repeating them. McConnell then said, now Tucker Carlson is exactly where he belongs, in Moscow, talking to Putin. Well, let me ask you, do you think Marjorie Taylor Greene, do you think she believes these lies or she's being paid to believe these lies? Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Because there has been so much legislative activity this past week, what you may not have noticed flying under the radar was that the House passed and President Biden signed a 2-year extension of Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which allows the NSA to give the FBI information on American citizens without the FBI first getting a warrant from what are called FISA courts. After 9/11, Congress added new spying powers to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act with Section 702, so that the National Security Agency could begin looking at emails, text messages, and phone records of any foreigner who traveled to the United States or talked with anybody living in the United States. Because these foreign nationals usually talk to American citizens were getting swept up in the surveillance. So FBI agents, taking advantage of Section 702, asked the NSA for permission to see what they had on these American citizens, and the NSA satisfied their requests without a warrant. The FBI was, and now still is, spying on American citizens without a warrant. I think this is the first time something like this has ever happened. I am shocked. Somebody buy me a pearl necklace to clutch. So Section 702 was scheduled to sundown last Friday, it was renewed at the last minute on Saturday without the warrant requirement, and that has disappointed civil libertarians in the House and Senate who said there's now, or once again, there is nothing to stop a future president from ordering his FBI to start searching the emails, text messages, and phone records of any American citizen who communicates with people living overseas. And the ACLU was against the warrantless searches, and Marjorie Taylor Greene insists one of the chief reasons, besides his pushing the Ukraine supplemental through, one of the chief reasons she wants Mike Johnson to get fired is because he allowed Section 702 to be renewed without the warrant requirements. And she's upset that the FBI doesn't need to go to a judge for a warrant for agents to listen in on her conversations with the Kremlin, getting this week's talking points. For 6 months, Speaker Johnson was able to hold up the Ukraine supplemental. But at the last minute, he pushed it through. And now the question is, will he survive? What will Marjorie Taylor Greene do? She's got the brilliant Arizona Congressman Paul Gosar, one of the most respected members of Congress, who's co-sponsoring the bill, and Congressman Tom Massey from Kentucky. So you got 3 Republicans co-sponsoring a motion to vacate the chair, while Johnson only has a 1-vote majority. So the co-sponsors alone, if they choose to bring the motion to the floor, they can get it passed. So Thomas Massey of Kentucky is demanding that Mike Johnson resign. And now Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying Speaker Johnson should save everybody the ordeal and just resign. And Speaker Johnson said on Monday, Marjorie is a good friend of mine, but I'm not stepping down. Marjorie was incensed and said, I am not Mike Johnson's friend. She said, I'm not making this up. She said, why did he say he's my friend? I'm not his friend. She said, I hardly know him. I believe her. I think Marjorie hardly knows him, or anything else for that matter. Marjorie, for the time being, still takes her orders from Donald Trump, who for the first time since Mike Johnson declared his intention to get the Ukraine supplemental passed, came to the defense of his embattled speaker during a radio interview on Monday. For the first time since Mike Johnson said he was going to push the supplemental through, Trump defended him. Trump called Johnson a good guy who was in a tough position with a slim majority. Trump said there were a lot of good Republicans who voted for it. That's what he said. There were a lot of good Republicans who voted for the supplemental, a lot of good Republicans who voted against the supplemental. I guess you could say there were a lot of very fine people on both sides of the issue, just like Charlottesville. Trump said, I'm not making this up, that what really disappointed him about the Ukraine supplemental was nothing for the border. He said he was really disappointed. This is what he said. I was really disappointed to see that there was nothing on border security. And he was really disappointed. Wow. Wonder how that happened. Anybody know why there was nothing for border security attached to the Ukraine supplemental? Leave a comment. I don't have a clue. You would think all Trump does is talk about border security. All Mike Johnson talks about is border security. How could they have forgotten to attach border security to the Ukraine supplemental, especially since there was this bipartisan border bill coming out of the Senate that was the most transformative border bill in 30 years. I guess it just slipped their mind. Very disappointed. But then Trump added, they didn't take care of border. He said this. This was during a radio interview. He said, don't worry about the border. I'll take care of it when I become president. You know, the same way he did the last time he was president. Speaker Johnson also got Congress to pass a $26 billion emergency supplemental for Israel, a country that has become anathema on our college campuses. Speaker Johnson announced he will be going to Columbia. Well, I don't think he could get in, but, he's going to New York to visit Columbia, whose president testified last week before Congress about anti-Semitism on college campuses. After Columbia's president testified, she returned to New York and began cracking down on pro-Palestinian protesters. And this was a really smart move. She asked New York City police for assistance in removing tent encampments on the quad. That's really smart, asking assistance from New York City police to break up a protest, because we know what a great job historically New York City police have always done when they're dealing with protesters. During Black Lives Matter protests, New York City police would literally drive their patrol cars into older people who were marching. Look up the millions and millions of dollars that they had to pay out to Black Lives protesters. I think in the past decade, we've had to pay here in New York City $1 billion in damages because of police brutality here in New York. Well, Congressman Ilhan Omar was born in Somalia. She represents Minnesota's 5th congressional district. The same way Marjorie Taylor Greene is everything wrong with America, Congresswoman Omar is everything that's right about our country. As is Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib of Michigan. She's the first Palestinian American ever to serve in Congress. And if you're thinking of donating to any members of Congress, you start with Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, and then you give to Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, and of course, Cori Bush. Now, if you're Jewish, like me, if you're a Jewish American feeling unsteady, especially about the situation in the Middle East, if you're scared, confused, this is what you do. No matter where you stand on this or where you don't stand on this, if you're confused. Whether you're Jewish, not Jewish, if you're Palestinian and terrified, or if you're a terrified Jew, if you're living in America with relatives who have been slaughtered in Gaza or Israel, one thing I know for certain is we need voices like Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar in the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. We need more voices like theirs. Wherever you fall on this, if you look at these protests happening on college campuses, there's a train that has already left the station with or without your permission, especially if you're over the age of 40. Nobody checked with you. The train has left the station. Nobody bothered to ask the people who destroyed the planet if it's okay that the train has left the station. And because of that, we need responsible voices in Washington like Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar and the squad, everybody in the squad. I'm sure that sounds patronizing coming from me, but all I know is I want to live in their America. As an American Jew, I have way more in common with the Squad. As an American Jew, I have way more in common with Palestinian Americans than I do with Marjorie Taylor Greene or Mike Johnson. So, to my fellow Jews who are listening, and my fellow Americans, I know you're a bit confused and frightened. Listen to me. Donate to Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar and Cori Bush, the congresswoman from St. Louis who needs money for legal fees. Anyone who trusts me, who listens to this show, for your own well-being, for your own mental health, donate to the Squad and Bernie, and only to the Squad and Bernie, and give the Squad the same power those deviants in the Freedom Caucus on the right have. The more money you send to Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Cori Bush, AOC, Presley, the more power they have. And wouldn't it be nice to have the Squad be as powerful as the Freedom Caucus? Elevate those voices with your money. $5. Instead of a cup of coffee, a non-union burnt cup of coffee from Starbucks today, send $5 to Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and Cori Bush and AOC. And I'll talk about Summer Lee in a second. I talked about her earlier. For your own well-being, for your own mental health. Again, if you don't agree with them, even more reason to elevate their voices. Let me remind my aging baby boomers who listen. Nobody's asking you for permission. The train has left the station, and you need to meet and get along with all the passengers. Otherwise, you end up sounding and looking like Marjorie Taylor Greene. So that would be Congresswoman Omar's daughter, who attends Columbia. She got into Columbia. And Congresswoman Ilhan Omar's daughter attends Columbia's Barnard College. And she was suspended for participating in the protests at Columbia. And now her daughter says she has been kicked out of the school, as well as the dormitories, with no place to live in New York City and no place to eat. College kid on a meal plan. She says, I have no place to live and nothing to eat. Ilhan Omar's daughter was one of 100 Columbia students arrested, and only one of 3 Columbia students who was suspended, kicked off the campus. Get out. Now, I suspect she checked her privilege. She is the daughter of a United States Congresswoman, and she knew to check her privilege. In other words, I suspect during the protest, she spoke louder than most because she is the daughter of a United States Congresswoman. You check your privilege. She is, however, not rich, and for 7 hours, she was handcuffed and held by New York City police before she was ever charged with trespassing. Now, I guess most of my listeners have been arrested. This is the United States, right? So we've all been arrested. You know how on television they read you your Miranda rights while they're cuffing you? Well, anyone who's been arrested knows it's nothing like Law and Order. Dick Wolf can go suck my wolf. Sometimes you're handcuffed because you're detained but not arrested, which means you're not entitled to hearing your Miranda rights or allowed to call anybody, and they can hold you for hours. When I was arrested, I waited 4 hours to hear my Miranda rights, and they only got read to me after I made it apparent I wasn't going to be bothering to call a lawyer. Look at how Rupert Murdoch's New York Post covered this arrest. In the headline, they accuse Ilhan Omar's daughter of being a privileged child of the wealthy because she attends a school whose tuition is $90,000 a year. Her mother makes $174,000 before taxes as a United States Congresswoman. I don't know anything about this family. I don't know never met the kid or the mother, but I can assure you, if the daughter is half as brilliant as her mom, she got a free ride at Columbia, as well she should. Protests against Israel only intensified after New York City police were brought in to crack down on Columbia students. There's a police presence over at Columbia that hasn't been seen since 1968, when students took over several buildings and held the dean hostage. Police later arrested 45 students during an anti-Israeli protest on Yale's campus. It's spreading. The train has left the station. Students attending Berkeley, California, stage a sit-in demanding a Palestinian studies program, formed a blockade to keep police officers from making arrests. Berkeley students also demanded the university divest itself of any investments with companies that do business with Israel. In New York City, police arrested at least 100 NYU students protesting Israel's treatment of the Palestinians. Google has fired at least 50 employees who protested the corporation's decision to work with Amazon on Project Nimbus, a $1.2 billion project providing internet cloud service to the Israeli government. Now, let me see. Let me do the math here. Google is working with Israel and Amazon, and according to my math, 2 negatives make a positive. You can't complain. Protests were organized in Sunnyvale and New York by a group called No Tech for Apartheid. Google said the employees were fired for not wearing their official badges and also hiding their faces, making it impossible to determine if they were in fact Google employees while they were protesting in the building. Google also said the employees were fired for being physically disruptive inside the Google offices. Google warned that more employees will be fired if protests are held once again within the building. October 7th is considered the most catastrophic intelligence failure in Israel's history. More Jews were murdered and raped in one day than at any time since the Holocaust. More than 6 months after the attack, the head of Israel's intelligence service has stepped down. But Benjamin Netanyahu remains. The foreign aid supplemental that just passed giving money to Israel includes billions in humanitarian aid for Gaza. But that package specifies that no money can go to the UN relief agency working on the ground in Gaza because Israel says that relief agency had several employees who participated in the October 7th massacre. But a new UN study shows that Israel has been unable to prove that UN relief workers in Gaza played any role on the October 7th attack. The House and Senate also moved forward on banning TikTok unless it's sold to a corporation approved by the United States government. Joe Biden says he's going to sign it. Donald Trump, as president, had called for the sale of TikTok, warning of its ties to the government of China. But now, as Joe Biden promises to sign legislation forcing a sale of TikTok, Donald Trump has reversed course and said the sale is a bad idea because it would only serve to make Facebook more powerful. Well, why the about face? What's it really about? Kellyanne Conway, his former campaign director, is now a lobbyist for TikTok, although latest reporting suggests she hasn't registered as a foreign lobbyist, which is against the law, although it's rarely enforced. Trump has also been getting large chunks of donations from Club for Growth, and reports are that those donations are contingent upon his opposing the forced sale of TikTok, because one of the largest contributors to Club for Growth is billionaire Jeff Yass, who has a huge financial stake in ByteDance, the parent company of TikTok. Yass is one of the wealthiest people from Pennsylvania, which held its primaries yesterday. One of the Democrats targeted in yesterday's primaries by Yass was Summer Lee, who is a first-term member of the Squad and one of the very first members of Congress to call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Back in 2022, when Summer Lee made her first bid, front organizations financed by AIPAC donated heavily to her primary challenger, and then when she won the primary, they donated heavily to her Republican challenger in the general. But she was still able to win in a congressional district that holds a large Jewish community that supports her. Mike Elk, my friend over at Payday Reports, says that AIPAC decided it wasn't worth throwing money at Summer Lee's primary challenger this time around. And she won the Democratic nomination handily last night. Jeff Yass, the billionaire who's donating to Club for Growth and getting that money to Donald Trump to come out against banning TikTok, because Jeff Yass also has a big stake in TikTok. Jeff Yass threw $800,000 against Summer Lee in this primary. And she ended up defeating Jeff Yass's primary challenger, Bhavini Patel, by 21 points. 21 points. This is the mop-up for April 24th. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you for finding me. Please like this episode so I remain in your feed. And if you want to support me, the best way is to copy and paste the link to this episode and copy it, paste it into a text message or an email or on Facebook, and share it with your friends. My friend, comedian Arj Barker, has come under fire in Australia after he ordered a woman breastfeeding during his performance to get out. He kicked her out. Now, in defense, there was no baby involved. She was, a woman was breastfeeding her baby in the middle of his comedy show. And I would have done the same thing as Arj, because when I'm performing, the only sucking sound should be coming from me on the stage. When Trump was president, don't breastfeed your kid at a comedy show. I know I'm going to get complaints now. People are going to, what's wrong with breastfeeding? Nothing. It's beautiful. I just think it's a bit of a distraction for, maybe I'm wrong. I know I've pissed off all the breastfeeders out there. Okay. Am I wrong? Do you want to sit next to somebody I don't know. What are you bringing a newborn baby to a comedy show? I guess what I'm saying is get off my lawn. All right, I need new clothes. I got to get new clothes. And a new face. I heard Old Navy is having a sale on faces. Good God. I'm going to get a new sweater and a new face at Old Navy. Hi. When Donald Trump was president, back in the good old days, he failed to secure the border, but he did separate families. And one of the work visas he promised to eliminate as president, and is still promising to eliminate once he's back in the Oval Office, is the work visa that allowed foreigners to come to America and take tech jobs, work certain tech jobs. He insisted that could be given to American citizens. But now it turns out his Truth Social platform, which keeps crashing, has begun hiring foreigners using the very same work visa that Donald Trump, as president and as candidate, is promising to eliminate. I don't know what to believe anymore with him. The entire scapegoating of migrants and immigrants and foreigners is political theater to rile up low information voters, convincing them it's people of color who are responsible for their economic immiseration and not Republicans cutting taxes on the backs of the middle class while gutting regulatory agencies that protect people who actually work for a living. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is all about the culture wars. If you cannot provide for your constituents, you fight the culture wars, cracking down on critical race theory, drag queens, and of course, migrants. DeSantis does have a serious problem in Florida with migrants. They don't have enough. They do not have enough migrants in Florida. Farmers are complaining that DeSantis's anti-immigration laws are leaving fruits and vegetables to rot. You may remember last year I played video of Florida Republicans, members of the state legislature, meeting with Hispanic leaders, urging them to tell the migrants, to tell Spanish-speaking farm workers to come back to Florida. We need you. I played the tape of these Florida Republicans saying, quote, please tell your community not to be frightened. These laws that were passed are only political, unquote. They went on to say the only reason we passed these laws were political, and they added, we wanted to give added power to the police. Isn't that sweet? By the way, DeSantis just passed a law making it harder for civilian review boards to discipline police officers. If you're a bystander and you want to watch the police to make sure they're not violating somebody's constitutional rights, this new law says you have to stand 25 feet away from police officers, which means you can't ask any questions when they're doing their work. And by doing their work, I mean turning Florida into more of a fascist state than it already is. Anyway, you might remember that Ron DeSantis didn't have any migrants to punish in his state. So he used Florida's state funds, government funds, to send his political operatives to Texas. They grabbed some migrants. We're talking about frightened children, mothers and dads, the most vulnerable people on the planet. And these DeSantis operatives in Texas tricked these migrants into thinking they were going to be given housing and jobs. But instead, they were flown to Martha's Vineyard, the wealthy liberal enclave. It was a way of telling coastal elitists, see, how does it feel having these people wandering your streets? It was sadistic and illegal in many ways. The governor of one state can't send his operatives into another state, grab that state's migrants, and then ship them off to Massachusetts to punish coastal elitists and these migrants. It's against the law. But tell me again how Republicans are all about states' rights. He literally invaded Texas without permission. Well, now it turns out lawyers for those migrants who were shipped to Martha's Vineyard, there are a lot of lawyers in Massachusetts and on Martha's Vineyard. And lawyers for those migrants applied for a special work visa. It's called a U visa, and it's a special work visa granted to migrants who came to America and were then victimized by a crime. So they were given an immigration judge ruled that they were victims of crimes. They were given a U visa, which means they cannot be deported and they can go get jobs. It turns out, according to this immigration judge, what DeSantis did was criminal. So he should be arrested. In fact, our entire treatment of migrants qualifies all of them for these U visas, because how we treat these migrants is illegal. We're violating international law as well as our own immigration laws. But once again, everything Ron DeSantis does or tries backfires. Instead of punishing the migrants who he shipped off to Martha's Vineyard, the immense cruelty inflicted on those children, mothers, and fathers has now resulted in their now being able to get U visas. That's what they're called, U visas. Considering it's Ron DeSantis, they should start calling them FU visas. FU, Ron DeSantis. Florida is no longer considered a swing state. Well, maybe it is. Hillary and Biden lost Florida to Trump. But Biden, as Obama's vice president, won Florida in 2008 and 2012. It was close. But after 2020, when Trump beat Biden by more than 3 percentage points, Biden did worse than Hillary in Florida. It was generally assumed that, like Ohio, Florida, once a swing state, is no longer a swing state and out of reach for Democrats. But then Ron DeSantis got his hands on the state of Florida and pushed through a 6-week abortion ban that was just upheld by the state Supreme Court of Florida, which also ruled that a referendum can be placed on the ballot this November so that Florida voters can decide whether Florida's state constitution can be amended to guarantee a woman's reproductive rights. This was the perfect confluence of events for Joe Biden. It was perfect politically, not for women who need an abortion in Florida, but perfect for the Democrats. The court said, yes, the Republicans' 6-week abortion can stand, but Floridians can vote on it in November. And as you know, Biden wants this election to be about abortion, because if it is, then voters who aren't sure about Joe Biden but are certain about a woman's right to choose, well, they're going to show up to vote for abortion. And while they're in the booth, they're also going to vote for Joe Biden. This is precisely how you energize the Democratic base. That's why Joe Biden was in Florida yesterday campaigning on abortion, while Donald Trump was stewing in a courtroom. Joe Biden was blaming Donald Trump for Florida's 6-week abortion ban. Kari Lake is a washed-up news anchor from Arizona who became the Republican nominee for governor in 2022, and she lost. She's now running for the Senate seat currently held by Kyrsten Sinema, the Democrat who became an independent last year. She still caucuses with the Democrats, but she will not be running for re-election this year. Good riddance. Instead, Democratic Congressman Ruben Gallego will most likely win the Democratic nomination for her seat at the end of July. He's been leading Kari Lake in the polls. He's a good guy. And this is good for Joe Biden. Now, Biden carried Arizona in 2020, but it's tight. And you will not see ticket splitting in Arizona. The people who vote for Ruben Gallego will not vote for Donald Trump because he's running against Kari Lake, who is synonymous with Donald Trump. Ruben Gallego in Arizona will be an example of a down-ballot candidate pushing Joe Biden up and over. Kari Lake is a very divisive figure, just like Trump. And now, Kari Lake's lies are catching up with her. In 2022, she ran for governor on the platform of, "This election is stolen." Seriously, that was her entire campaign. Vote for me because if I lose, that means the election was stolen. She also ran as a pro-life candidate, and this was 2022, the same year that the Dobbs decision came down, where the Supreme Court overturned Roe. The Dobbs decision was, June of 2022? Around June of 2022. By November of 2022, Americans, voters, were beginning to get a glimpse of how crazy the anti-abortion Republicans are. And that's one of the reasons Kari Lake lost. But now we are coming up on the 2-year anniversary of the Dobbs decision, and the reverberations are being felt. It spells doom for the GOP and Kari Lake in Arizona. Now, we know the men who run the GOP never cared about abortion. They always used it as a fundraising ploy. They always used abortion as a way to court low information imbeciles. They used abortion so imbeciles would vote for them. But abortion was never supposed to be outlawed. Abortion was all about getting Republicans elected president so they could lower taxes for the rich. Reagan lowers taxes for the rich. He runs as the pro-life candidate. but abortion isn't overturned. George W. Bush runs as the pro-life candidate, gives tax cuts to the rich. Our hands are tied. We can't get abortion overturned. Donald Trump, schmuck, gives tax cuts to the wealthy, appoints 3 judges who promised to overturn Roe. And those 3 judges may have destroyed the Republican Party more than Donald Trump has. Donald Trump, to placate the evangelicals, appointed 3 extremists to sit on the court because he's stupid, he's myopic. He could have found 3 judges who were moderates, or at least wouldn't perjure themselves during their confirmation hearings like all 3 of Trump's nominees did when they swore under oath that Roe v. Wade was settled law and they saw no reason to overturn it. All 3 of them, during their confirmation hearings, said Roe was settled law. Instead, Donald Trump nominated 3 liars who, along with Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas and Chief Justice Roberts, voted to reverse Roe in, I think it was June of 2022. I think the Dobbs decision was 2022. The vote was 6-3. Sotomayor, Breyer, and Kagan voted to keep Roe, 6-3. Had Hillary won in 2016, she would have picked the 3 justices Trump picked. And it would have been 6-3, the other way around. I think my math is right. I think that's correct. I just know if Hillary were president, she wouldn't have picked the 3 justices Trump did, and abortion would still be the law of the land. So Roe gets overturned. We're coming up on 2 years. We're seeing 6-week abortion bans in Florida. And in Arizona, where Kari Lake is running for Senate, they're about to put into effect a law dating back to 1864, which bans abortion from the moment of conception of the mother, not the baby, the mother. Before the mother is even born, her abortion is banned. And Republicans like Kari Lake are liars. She campaigned in 2022 on getting rid of abortion completely. She also, I played you the tapes, she campaigned specifically on the 1864 law when she was running for governor in 2022, where she said abortion is banned at conception. And she said, I'm for that. She didn't think the state legislature would be stupid enough to implement it. So this time around, when she's running for Senate, she knew that this was a political disaster. And 2 weeks ago, she got on the phone, and so did Trump. And they began calling Arizona state legislators, Republicans, begging them, urging them to dump the 1864 ban and go with a bill that bans abortions after 15 weeks. But since she and Trump made those calls, Republicans in the Arizona State House have had 2 opportunities to obey their orders from Trump and Kari Lake. And they've had 2 opportunities since those calls were made to reverse the 1864 law, and the Republicans refused. They said, we believe abortion at the time of conception is murder. So, This is a big problem for Kari Lake and Trump. Over the weekend, Kari Lake was in Idaho speaking to a Right to Life group. And one of the questions she got asked was, why have you compromised on abortion? They call her a heroine. And I think they're also on it. I think they're on heroin, but they refer to her as a pro-life heroine. They said, so she's up in Idaho at a pro-life meeting, and some of the questions, she gets asked the question, why did you call the state legislators, urging them to reverse that 1864 law when you've been telling us for 2 years you were for it? Here was the heroine's answer. Note, please, that she's referred to as a heroine.
Imagine our profound disappointment then when we saw this heroine join the media mob in calling for an immediate fix to Arizona's historic law protecting preborn children.
Preborn children. You mean fetuses. Preborn children. This is how they sell used Lexuses, right? It used to be, when I was a kid, it was a used Lexus, but a used Lexus doesn't sound as good as a pre-owned Lexus. You don't want a car that's used, but if it's pre-owned, that sounds positive. You weren't adopted, you were pre-owned. These aren't fetuses, they're pre-born. Honey, I'm not impotent, I'm pre-erect. Well, here's Kari Lake lying. Here she is just lying, right? We know for a fact she was on the phone with Arizona state Republicans in the state house saying, get rid of that 1864 law. But here she is telling Idaho Right to Lifers that she supports the 1864 law, even though she was working the phones, urging Republicans in the state house to reverse it.
Our first priority is to save as many babies as possible. And this law passed. The Arizona Supreme Court said this is the law of Arizona. But unfortunately, the people running our state have said we're not going to enforce it. So it's really political theater. We don't have that law as much as many of us wish we did.
I'll have more on abortion in a second. You know, I said before the Iowa caucuses, this election in November was going to be about abortion. And when I said it, it was wishful thinking. I had no idea it was going to be about abortion. I mean, I kind of felt it was going to be about abortion, that it should be about abortion, but Trump blew it. Those three justices overturned Roe. And that ruined it. The Republicans had a great thing going. Pretend you want to overturn abortion. They overturned it. No, you use it as a reason to vote for Republicans. Okay, I'll have more on abortion in a second. But Kari Lake, did I mention she's a liar? She lies about election fraud. She has spent the past year and a half insisting she lost the 2022 race for governor because Democrats rigged the election. Little problem with this lie. She recently defaulted on a defamation lawsuit filed by a Maricopa County election supervisor who she accused of rigging the election for Democrats. The only problem with her lie is Maricopa County Recorder Stephen Richer is a Republican. So he sued Kari Lake for defamation because of all the death threats he got. And Kari Lake defaulted on the defamation lawsuit, like Rudy Giuliani defaulted on the defamation lawsuit filed by those two women in Georgia who got death threats. the same way Alex Jones defaulted on the defamation lawsuit by the parents of the children who were killed, and they ended up getting death threats. When you default on a defamation lawsuit, you are saying, how much do I owe you? In Rudy's and Alex Jones's case, they just declared bankruptcy and are now making it next to impossible for their victims to collect. Carrie Lake is running for Senate. I don't know what the laws are, the bankruptcy laws in Arizona are. I suspect there's a way to pay her settlement through her campaign war chest or through the Republican Party. I don't know. But the Supreme Court this week handed down some more bad news for Carrie Lake when they refused to hear her case challenging the 2022 election results where she lost. They rejected her argument that she lost the governor's race due to faulty electronic voting machines. These people are stupid. I mean, she used to be an anchor woman. She read a teleprompter for 20 years, and then she went into politics. Stupid. But she has certitude, because only stupid people have certitude. I am going to Old Navy tomorrow, and I am gonna be a dandy. I'm going to change. I'm going to buy a new face. I realize it. I was saying it's the camera. It's the face. That's the problem. And I'm gonna look like Tom Wolfe. I'm gonna get a cane and a silk suit, a white suit, and a hat. Abortion. So, how are we doing on time here? You know, this was supposed to be a short one. I don't know what to do. I want to do this show every day, but for a half hour, or maybe an hour. Back to abortion. So I'm not going to do a show tomorrow, because I'll do a show late Thursday night, early Thursday morning. Joe Biden needs to win Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. He gets to 270. If he loses Wisconsin, then he needs to win Arizona again. Bobby Kennedy just qualified for the ballot in Michigan. He's trying to get on the ballot in Wisconsin. And he could take, the idea is, we know, for him to take votes from Joe Biden. Kennedy is very cloudy on where he stands on abortion. He's on record saying every abortion is a tragedy. No, that's not true. He never mentions abortion on the stump. He sends mixed signals. According to the Washington Post, Kennedy's only official move on abortion came when he visited an anti-abortion activist in Atlanta who supports Donald Trump. There's a reason his brothers and sisters endorse Biden and are begging him to drop out. At times, Bobby Kennedy Jr. hints that he agrees with the Dobbs decision because it leaves abortion up to the states. Leaving abortion up to the states is all well and good if you're a woman living in New York or California. Not so good if you're a woman stuck in the 14 red states that have made it next to impossible for women, especially poor women, to exercise their God-given reproductive rights. States' rights is the argument proffered by misogynists and racists. When Bobby's father was desegregating schools in Alabama, when Bobby's father was the attorney general, back then when he was desegregating schools in Alabama, anybody who said integration was a states' rights issue was saying it because states' rights is a dog whistle for I want every single black person living in the old Confederacy to be kept from voting or going to a decent public school. That's what states' rights meant in the 60s and today. Now, Kennedy has been cagey on abortion, which is why pro-Biden, pro-abortion groups have already begun airing commercials in Wisconsin and Michigan reminding voters that Bobby Kennedy, when it comes to abortion, is either a coward or pro-life. Joe Biden, who worships in the same church that Bobby Kennedy does, is not a coward when it comes to abortion. Well, Bobby Kennedy had some success with New Hampshire Republicans last week who pushed through in their state house new legislation that gives parents the right to refuse to get their children vaccinated for polio or measles. It passed the state house. If it's signed into law, parents in New Hampshire will be able to register their children for public school without having to show proof of a polio or measles vaccine. Who says Republicans don't believe in teaching their kids to share? Here, have some of my polio. That's the work of Bobby Kennedy, bringing back polio and measles. In an interview 2 days ago, Donald Trump said, "I'm beginning to suspect Bobby Kennedy will peel votes away from me as well as Joe Biden." Trump has been insisting that that he has nothing to do with Bobby Kennedy Jr. We know that Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s campaign chair in New York State had to resign after she was caught on tape saying Bobby's running to siphon votes away from Joe Biden. His campaign chair in New York State was there on January 6th and said it was 99% peaceful. Donald Trump has reportedly asked Bobby Kennedy to be his running mate, and Bobby Kennedy has turned him down. So the people who donate to Bobby Kennedy are the same people who donate to Donald Trump. The Bobby Kennedy Jr. campaign is lousy with Trump operatives who thought Bobby Kennedy would steal votes from Joe Biden. But now new polling shows that more Trump supporters are likely to have a favorable view of Kennedy than they do of Joe Biden. And other polling shows that in a three-way matchup, Biden, Trump, and Bobby Kennedy, Trump is the one who loses votes to Bobby Kennedy. Biden's coming up in the polls. He's doing really well. And take a look at Trump sitting in that courtroom. He does not look healthy. And he is going down, 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 and Joe Biden is going up, up, up. Take an hour a week and work for the Democratic Party. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you to Bob in the chat room. Thank you for watching and listening to me. If you enjoyed any of this, please like this episode so I remain in your feed. Please share it. Tell people this is a grassroots show. I don't have any network behind me. This is just people sharing episodes. So if you enjoy any of this, please be, what's the term they use? An ambassador? Is that what it's called? And tell people about the show. Subscribe to my channel. This is an audio podcast. And so take me with you on your next drive or your next walk. I guess that covers everything. Okay. I will do a show late Thursday night, early Friday morning. Thank you all.